It was a quiet day on Earth when the first sign of something extraordinary appeared. The usual hum of satellites and communication signals was interrupted by something far more urgent. An odd, distorted message blinked on the deep space monitoring screen. It wasn't anything Earth scientists had ever encountered before. A distress signal, faint but undeniably real, coming from a remote part of the galaxy. The signal was irregular, and the location was too far for Earth's regular space patrols to investigate immediately. But there was something about it that piqued the interest of Earth's top researchers. Was it a cry for help from another civilization, or was it some kind of trap? The scientists weren't sure, but there was no denying the importance of the discovery. The message contained coordinates leading to a distant planet, uncharted and far from any known space routes. The signal was unmistakably artificial, far too complex for natural sources. Something, or someone, was in trouble, and Earth was the closest to answering the call. As the team worked to analyze the data, the decision was made to send a team of explorers to investigate. However, they were not prepared for what they would find. Far away on the edge of the galaxy, a sleek alien spaceship tore through the atmosphere of an isolated, barren world. It wasn't a smooth descent. The ship rattled, sparks flying from its damaged systems. The vessel had been under attack. Fire from an unseen enemy had shredded its hull, sending it plummeting toward the planet below. The alien woman inside, the only survivor of the crash, clung to consciousness as the ship crashed into the desolate landscape. When the dust finally settled, she lay motionless amidst the wreckage. Her species was known for its advanced technology, capable of traveling between galaxies, manipulating energy, and even harnessing the power of stars. But now, as her systems flickered and failed around her, she was nothing more than a broken, abandoned figure on a hostile world. The ship's advanced tech sputtered and sparked, a stark contrast to the barren, lifeless surroundings. The alien's once glowing armor now dimmed, leaving her vulnerable and weak. Her name was Zira, a warrior of a highly advanced race. Until now, she had been sent on a mission, one she would never complete. The crash had been no accident. It was sabotage. She had been betrayed by those she trusted, and now, as her life force drained away, she was utterly alone. Her race had once been unstoppable, ruling vast swaths of the galaxy. Now, she was a casualty, stranded on a world forgotten by the cosmos. Back on Earth, a young student named Alex was about to have his life turned upside down. He had always been fascinated by space, but his knowledge was that of an ordinary student, not a seasoned astronaut or expert in alien technology. He was part of a school exploration mission, an educational program that allowed young students to study distant planets. As part of the program, they were briefed on the mysterious distress signal that had recently been picked up. Despite his fascination with the unknown, Alex had always been cautious. He knew the stories of people encountering aliens, of the dangers lurking in the depths of space. The idea of going on a mission to investigate a distress signal sounded thrilling, but also incredibly risky. His team, though filled with young explorers like himself, wasn't exactly prepared for the challenges that awaited them. When they finally reached the planet, the students were filled with excitement and awe. The barren world looked lifeless, a mixture of dusty plains and jagged mountains stretching as far as the eye could see. It was a place untouched by time, a world waiting to reveal its secrets. Alex's group was excited to investigate the planet's surface, though none of them were prepared for what lay ahead. The team set out, guided by the coordinates from the signal, but Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. As they trekked further from their landing site, a feeling of unease began to creep into his mind. The atmosphere, though strange and alien, felt almost too quiet, too still. The planet seemed as if it were holding its breath. And then, just as Alex was beginning to question the decision to come, he stumbled upon something that would change everything. He had wandered a little too far from the rest of the group, driven by curiosity. And there, amidst the rocky terrain, he saw it. A massive wreckage. The remains of the alien vessel, twisted metal and glowing fragments scattered across the surface. The ship had crashed violently, and in its aftermath, there was no sign of life. But then, just as Alex turned to head back, something caught his eye. A faint movement, barely noticeable. It came from the wreckage. His heart skipped a beat as he moved closer, cautiously, unsure of what he might find. He had read stories of alien encounters, but nothing could have prepared him for this. There, lying amongst the debris, was the alien woman, Zara. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow, her body battered and broken. Her once beautiful armor was cracked and scorched, and her eyes fluttered weakly as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Alex stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. His mind raced with possibilities. This was real. He wasn't sure if he was imagining it, but there was no mistaking what lay before him. He knew that helping her could mean danger. She wasn't from this world, and who knew what kind of powers or intentions she might have. But as Alex looked down at the fragile alien before him, something inside him stirred. He couldn't just leave her there to die. He made a decision in that moment, a decision that would set him on a path he could never turn back from. As he bent down to examine her injuries, he heard the faintest whisper, a soft voice barely audible. "Help. Me." Alex's heart raced. The choice was clear now. He had to help her. Whether it was a risk or not, he couldn't walk away from the distress signal that had led him here. Without fully understanding the consequences of his actions, Alex lifted the wounded alien into his arms, determined to get her to safety. Little did he know, the dangers surrounding him were only just beginning, and the bond between him and the alien woman would change both of their lives forever. This was only the beginning of an adventure that would test their courage, their strength, and their very humanity. As Alex cradled the injured alien in his arms, he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Her advanced technology, the glowing remnants of her once pristine armor, and the strange patterns that flickered on her suit left him in awe. She wasn't just any alien. She was something entirely different. The alien woman was beautiful in a way that was almost otherworldly. Despite the dirt and grime, there was a grace to her features, a regal aura that seemed to command the very air around her. Her skin shimmered faintly, even in the dull light, and her once flawless face, now bruised and bloodied, still held a certain ethereal quality. Alex quickly checked her pulse. There was still a faint sign of life, but she was barely conscious. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes flickered open for a split second before closing again. He couldn't help but notice how strange her eyes were, black, with specks of iridescent light swirling inside them. They were beautiful, yet unsettling, like they held the knowledge of the universe itself. Despite the mystery of her appearance, Alex knew he couldn't leave her behind. Her injuries were severe, and without help, she wouldn't survive. But there was something more than just compassion urging him forward. The sense that she was important, that her life meant more than just an alien encounter, weighed heavily on his mind. She wasn't just an alien. She was a being of incredible power. And it was clear that she had been sent on a mission of some sort, only to be betrayed and left to die. But just as Alex was about to move her toward a safer location, a strange noise broke through the eerie silence of the alien world. It was faint at first, like the rustle of leaves in a distant breeze, but it was growing louder, more distinct. Someone, or something, was approaching. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he glanced nervously around. His first instinct was to hide. But where? The landscape was barren, with no shelter in sight. His mind raced, trying to think of a way to protect the alien girl without being detected. The noise grew louder, and Alex's worst fears began to materialize. The sound wasn't just the wind. It was footsteps, and not human footsteps. The alien girl, still unconscious, began to stir slightly, her hand twitching ever so slightly. Her enemies were near. The faction that had shot her down, the one that had been hunting her, was closing in. She had been betrayed, and now they had come to finish the job. Alex's pulse quickened, and the reality of the danger set in. He wasn't just helping an injured alien. He was getting involved in something far bigger than he could have imagined. His gaze darted to the ground around him, looking for anything that could help them hide. Then his eyes landed on something that seemed out of place, a small device, half buried in the dirt. It was an advanced piece of tech, glowing faintly, unlike anything he had ever seen before. Instinctively, he reached for it, picking it up and examining it. It was a cloaking device. He had heard of them in the context of sci-fi movies, but he never imagined he'd hold one in his hands. Without wasting any time, Alex activated the device, and to his amazement, the world around them seemed to shimmer and blur. The cloak enveloped them both, hiding them from view. The device was working, but Alex knew it wouldn't last forever. He couldn't just stand there and wait for the enemies to pass. They had to move, and they had to move quickly. With the alien girl still cradled in his arms, Alex began to move as quietly as he could. The cloak provided some protection, but it wouldn't stop the enemies from sensing them if they were too close. His mind raced as he carefully navigated through the rocky terrain, trying to find a safe path deeper into the wilderness. Every step he took was filled with tension, every sound amplified in his ears. The slightest noise could betray their position. As they moved, Alex could hear the voices of the enemies getting closer. They were speaking in an alien language, but Alex could tell from their tone that they were not here for peaceful negotiations. They were here to finish what they had started. The alien woman, still barely conscious, murmured softly, as if in a dream, but Alex couldn't make out the words. The cloak shimmered and flickered as they moved, and Alex knew they didn't have much time. The alien faction had advanced technology of their own, and they would be able to detect the cloaking device if it wasn't perfect. Sweat trickled down his forehead as he quickened his pace, keeping his eyes on the path ahead. His heart pounded in his chest as they maneuvered through the alien landscape, the shadows of their pursuers creeping ever closer. The fast-paced action escalated as Alex and the alien girl ducked behind a cluster of jagged rocks. The enemy forces were almost upon them, and Alex's breath was shallow, his hands trembling. He had no training for this kind of thing. He was just a student, but instinct drove him forward, and he knew that if he didn't act fast, both of them would be caught. His mind raced, analyzing their surroundings. He needed a way to outsmart the enemies. They couldn't outrun them, but maybe they could outthink them. Alex scanned the area and spotted a narrow passage leading into a small cave-like structure. It wasn't much, but it offered a potential hiding spot. Without hesitation, he adjusted his hold on the alien woman and made his way toward the passage. The cloak flickered again, and Alex felt a surge of panic rise in his chest. He pushed forward, ignoring the fear creeping into his mind. The stakes had never been higher, and his every move felt like it could be his last. As they neared the passage, Alex could hear the enemy closing in. Their footsteps grew louder, and Alex's pulse quickened. He could feel the pressure building, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. They were close, so close, but the cave entrance was just ahead. With one final burst of speed, Alex reached the passage and slipped inside, the cloaking device shielding them at the last possible moment. The enemy passed by just seconds later, their figures visible through the shimmering cloak. Alex held his breath, praying that they hadn't noticed anything unusual. For a brief moment, everything was still. Then, once the sounds of the enemy faded into the distance, Alex allowed himself to exhale in relief. They had made it for now. But this was only the beginning. The real danger was just starting, and the unknown fate of the alien woman rested on Alex's shoulders. Little did he know, the world around them was about to change forever. The cave was eerily silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind outside. Alex had just settled into a makeshift shelter deep inside the narrow passage when the alien girl stirred. Her eyes flickered open, glowing with an intensity that sent a shiver down Alex's spine. She was awake, fully alert now. Her body was battered, but there was a fire in her eyes that spoke of resilience and power. "I won't leave you," Alex said, his voice firm with conviction. "You don't have to face this alone. I'll protect you." Her glowing eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time since they met, Alex saw something in her eyes. Trust. Maybe it was a small flicker, but it was there. "You don't know what you're offering," she said, her voice low. "This is more than you realize. You're helping me fight against an empire, against an unstoppable force." "I don't care," Alex said, his voice unwavering. "I can't just leave you to face this alone. We'll figure this out together." A small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corners of her lips. "Then let's make sure we survive." As the fight continued, the alien girl's advanced abilities and weapons gave her the upper hand, but it was Alex's ingenuity that tipped the scales. The traps he had set worked better than expected, catching the enemies off guard. His quick thinking, paired with the alien girl's power, formed a bond between them. The contrast between her advanced technology and Alex's human resourcefulness created a synergy, one that they both needed to survive. Together, they became an unstoppable team. Despite the vast technological differences, they had something far more powerful: determination, trust, and an unbreakable bond forged in the heat of battle. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for each other, and nothing could stand in their way. The night air was thick with tension as Alex crouched in the shadows, his heart pounding in his chest. He could hear them, distant hums and mechanical whirs cutting through the quiet of the alien world. The pursuit was far from over. The alien faction hunting them had grown smarter, more relentless, and now they had reinforcements. Alex glanced at the alien girl, her expression unreadable as she checked the settings on the cloaking device. The technology, once a marvel in Alex's eyes, had become their only hope of survival. Without it, they were exposed. The enemies had not only sent soldiers after them, but also deployed an army of robots and drones, machines capable of blending seamlessly with the surroundings, making them almost invisible. These machines weren't just drones. They were deadly, equipped with advanced weapons and systems designed to track and predict their every move. The AI controlling the machines had access to vast amounts of data, which it used to anticipate human tactics, making it almost impossible to outsmart them. Every move Alex and the alien girl made was being monitored, analyzed, and countered. "It's only a matter of time," the alien girl said softly, her voice tinged with concern as she peered through the foliage, watching the horizon. "They're closing in." Alex nodded grimly. His mind raced for a solution, but every option seemed to lead to a dead end. They were outnumbered and outmatched by the technology at the enemy's disposal. The only thing they had left was their wits, and the aliens' advanced weaponry. Suddenly, a soft beep from the cloaking device interrupted his thoughts. The alien girl stiffened, her eyes scanning the dense forest. She raised a hand to signal Alex to be silent. Then, through the stillness, came the unmistakable sound of movement. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate. The drones had detected them. "Stay low," the alien girl whispered, crouching next to him. Alex's breath quickened. He had to trust her now. The aliens' technology was their only advantage. She activated the cloaking device, and for a moment, everything around them shimmered before they vanished into the forest. But just as they thought they had escaped detection, the whir of a drone's engines filled the air. It was close, too close. Alex's heart skipped a beat as the drone flew overhead, scanning for heat signatures. His pulse raced, and for a moment, he thought they were finished. But then, the drone passed, not detecting them. "That was too close," Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. "We can't keep running forever." The alien girl didn't answer immediately. She was scanning their surroundings, calculating their next move. "They know where we are," she finally said. "We can't outrun them. We need to fight back." Before Alex could respond, the air was shattered by a loud, piercing explosion. The ground beneath them shook, and the sound of gunfire rang out in the distance. The enemy had found them, and they weren't going to stop until they were captured or destroyed. In a flash, Alex and the alien girl were on the move, darting through the underbrush. They could hear the mechanical march of the enemy, their robotic soldiers closing in from all sides. Alex's thoughts raced. He couldn't just rely on the aliens' tech anymore. They had to act fast, outsmart the enemy. But it was too late. The first wave of enemy soldiers appeared from the trees, their mechanical limbs moving with precision. They were fast, relentless, and armed with deadly weapons. The alien girl raised her weapon, firing at the first of the soldiers, but the robots just kept coming. Alex felt the ground tremble beneath his feet as more enemies appeared, surrounding them from every angle. He had no time to think, no time to plan. His heart pounded in his chest as he grabbed a fallen branch, hoping to use it as a weapon. But before he could strike, one of the robots lunged at him. He ducked, barely avoiding its laser blast. Then the worst thing that could happen did. Alex's fellow student, Bonner, emerged from the trees, his face pale and determined. Bonner had always been a bit of a show-off, but in this moment he was focused on protecting the group. He tackled one of the robots, throwing himself in front of it to protect Alex and the alien girl. "No," Alex shouted, but it was too late. Bonner was caught in the robot's grip, the machine's strength overpowering him. A flash of red light erupted from the robot's chest, and Bonner was thrown to the ground, motionless. "Bonner!" Alex cried, rushing toward him. But it was no use. Bonner was gone. The alien girl moved silently behind him, her expression hard. She didn't speak, but Alex could feel the weight of her gaze on him. This loss, this betrayal of their own, was just as painful for her as it was for him. She may not have known Bonner well, but the tragedy of it hit her hard. "Stay focused," the alien girl said softly, placing a hand on Alex's shoulder. "We mourn later. We survive now." Alex swallowed hard, blinking away the tears threatening to spill. He could feel his chest tightening with grief and anger. Bonner's death wasn't just a loss. It was a reminder of how high the stakes were. They were fighting for their lives, but now the fight was personal. With a steadying breath, Alex wiped his eyes and nodded. "Right. We survive." The two of them moved as one, side by side, their connection deepening in the face of loss. They were no longer just a human and an alien. Now they were allies, bound by shared purpose, by survival. As they retreated further into the dense forest, the alien girl activated the cloaking device once again, rendering them invisible to the oncoming threat. But Alex knew it wouldn't last forever. They couldn't run from the enemy forever. They needed to come up with a plan, and fast. The tension in the air was palpable as they moved through the dense foliage, the sound of the enemy's pursuit growing louder. Alex's mind raced, his thoughts swirling with grief, fear, and determination. They had lost Bonner, but they couldn't afford to let that loss define them. They had to keep fighting. As the night wore on, they moved deeper into the wilderness, always staying one step ahead of their pursuers. But Alex knew that the enemy was closing in. It was only a matter of time before the final confrontation came. The world around them was shaking as the enemy closed in, relentless, their machines marching forward. Alex could feel the vibrations in his chest, the ground trembling with each passing moment. The enemy was near, too near, and the fear was almost suffocating. He glanced over at the alien girl, who stood tall and resolute, her expression one of unwavering determination. "We have no more time," she said, her voice calm but carrying the weight of what was about to happen. "We'll make our stand here. There's no other choice." Alex's eyes widened in confusion. "What do you mean? What do you have in mind?" The alien girl's hand moved swiftly to a hidden control panel on her wrist. As she pressed a sequence of buttons, the sky above them began to crackle with energy. Alex looked up in shock as something massive, something incomprehensible, began to take shape above them. A satellite weapon, hidden in the clouds, activated by the alien's command. He could hardly believe his eyes. That's an orbital bombardment system, Alex whispered in awe, realizing the sheer power of the technology the alien girl had at her disposal. It was a weapon capable of annihilating entire fleets in a matter of seconds, a weapon that could turn the tide of this battle. The sky split open as laser beams shot through the atmosphere, slicing the air like deadly lightning. Explosions erupted in the distance, lighting up the dark sky in flashes of brilliant light. The alien girl's hands moved quickly, manipulating the system to target the enemy's forces. The satellite weapon was firing, and with each blast, the enemy's forces were being decimated, reduced to nothing but scattered debris. For a moment, it seemed like they had won. But then the enemy retaliated. The alien faction was not going down so easily. Suddenly, a barrage of missiles came soaring from the distance, aiming directly for them. The alien girl raised her hand, summoning a protective shield around them, but the energy it took was draining. Alex could see it. The faint glow around her body was flickering, her strength waning with each passing second. "We need to end this now," she said, her voice strained. The orbital bombardment was taking its toll on her, and if they didn't act quickly, the weapon would be useless. Alex looked at the battlefield ahead, the chaos unfolding around them. The alien faction was relentless, sending wave after wave of robots, drones, and soldiers to overpower them. There was no more running, no more hiding. They had to fight, together. Without thinking, Alex grabbed a nearby weapon, an energy rifle he'd taken from one of the fallen enemies, and ran toward the approaching line of soldiers. His heart was racing, adrenaline surging through his veins. He wasn't trained for combat, but he had to fight. He had no choice. The alien girl followed closely behind him, her eyes glowing with energy as she activated her own weaponry. With a wave of her hand, she summoned powerful blasts of energy that tore through the advancing enemy soldiers. They were no match for her advanced abilities, but the enemy was relentless, and more soldiers kept coming. Alex fought with everything he had, using his ingenuity to set traps and create distractions. He fired shots, ducking behind cover, and then sprinted to a new position. But he wasn't alone. The alien girl moved like a force of nature, her every movement fluid, graceful, and deadly. Her energy weapons flashed as she tore through the enemy ranks, sending soldiers flying in every direction. The ground shook with the force of her strikes. But it wasn't enough. The more enemies she took down, the more her energy reserves depleted. Alex could see it. Her movements were slowing, her breathing heavier. She was starting to falter. "No, you can't," Alex whispered under his breath, panic rising in his chest. He couldn't lose her. Not like this. With each blast she fired, her strength drained further. The once bright glow in her eyes began to dim, the power she'd relied on fading with each passing moment. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. She kept fighting, her body pushing past its limits. Then, a massive explosion tore through the battlefield. One of the enemy's missiles hit the ground near them, sending a shockwave that threw Alex to the ground. He gasped for air, struggling to stand up. He saw the alien girl in the distance, her shield flickering as she fought to maintain it. But something was wrong. Her energy had nearly been drained, and her movements were sluggish. A group of enemy soldiers surrounded her, closing in fast. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he realized what was happening. The alien girl was about to be overwhelmed. He couldn't let that happen. He scrambled to his feet, his mind racing as he rushed toward her. The sounds of battle filled the air. Screams, explosions, and the constant hum of laser fire. Alex pushed forward, his every step fueled by desperation. He couldn't let her die. She had saved him so many times, and now it was his turn to save her. He reached her just as the enemy closed in. Alex didn't think. He acted. He grabbed a grenade from his pack and tossed it into the crowd of soldiers. The explosion sent several of them flying, and for a moment the battlefield was still. But it wasn't enough. The enemy kept coming. They weren't going to stop. The alien girl turned to him, her eyes dimming as she staggered toward him. "Alex, get out of here. You can still escape." "No," Alex shouted, grabbing her arm. "We're not leaving. Not like this." But the alien girl smiled, her strength finally giving out. She collapsed to the ground, her energy reserves completely exhausted. "You have to live. For both of us." With that, she raised her hand one last time, activating a final blast of energy. The explosion was massive, blinding. It consumed everything in its path, obliterating the enemy soldiers and leaving nothing but smoke and destruction in its wake. Alex fell to the ground beside her, gasping for breath, his heart shattered. He had lost her, but he couldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. He couldn't give up, not after everything they had been through. As the smoke cleared, Alex slowly got to his feet. The battle was over. The enemy had been defeated. But at what cost? The alien girl's body lay motionless on the ground, her sacrifice marking the end of their journey. And as Alex stood over her, he vowed to honor her memory, to continue fighting, for both of them. The battlefield had fallen silent, the echoes of destruction fading into the stillness. The air was thick with the aftermath of the chaos. The smoke still lingered, and the earth was scared with the remnants of war. Alex stood motionless, his body battered and bruised, his mind racing. The battle was won, but at a terrible cost. His eyes slowly moved to the ground, where the alien girl lay, her once radiant form now lifeless in his arms. Her skin had lost its glow, the color drained from her face, and her energy, the very thing that had powered her through every fight, had been completely exhausted. Alex could barely believe it, how quickly everything had changed. She had been his protector, his ally, and in many ways, his friend. Now she was slipping away. "Please, don't leave me," Alex whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He had seen death before, but never like this. Never someone who had fought so hard to survive. Someone who had shown him the true meaning of strength, sacrifice, and resilience. Her eyes flickered open one last time, barely a spark of light left in them. She looked up at Alex, and though she could no longer speak, he could read the expression on her face. She was telling him it was okay. She was at peace. I'm sorry." Alex choked out, his hands trembling as he held her. "I should have been stronger. I should have done more." She managed a weak smile, her breath shallow. Slowly, she lifted her hand, placing it on his cheek, her touch gentle despite the immense power she had once held. In her final moments, she didn't look like the unstoppable warrior who had faced overwhelming odds. Instead, she looked like someone who had found something human, something pure, amidst all the chaos. "You were strong enough," she murmured, her voice barely audible, but filled with warmth. "You showed me that kindness could still exist, even in the darkest of times." Her words struck him like a blow to the chest. It had been kindness, not technology, that had bonded them. It had been his willingness to help her, despite the risks that had brought them together. He had never imagined that such a small act could lead to something so profound, something so powerful. And now, as she lay dying, she was telling him that he had made a difference. In the end, that was all that mattered. Tears welled up in Alex's eyes as he tried to fight them back. He couldn't bear the thought of losing her, but deep down, he knew what had to be done. The alien girl had already given him so much, her strength, her knowledge, her protection, but he could not risk her life being used by the AI that had destroyed her world. In the midst of the battle, Alex had discovered the alien technology hidden within her. It was unlike anything he had ever seen. Advanced weapons, cloaking devices, and even a potential way to bring her back. But there was a catch. The technology was linked to the AI that had betrayed her, the same AI that had wiped out her entire race. If Alex used it to save her, there was a chance that the AI would take control, using her as a tool for its own malevolent purposes. The choice was agonizing. He could try to bring her back, selfishly, for his own sake, or he could let her go and ensure humanity's future safety. Alex closed his eyes, his mind racing with the possibilities. He thought of the AI's cold, calculating nature, how it had used its technology to decimate the alien girl's people, and how, if left unchecked, it could do the same to humanity. In that moment, he realized that his choice wasn't just about saving the alien girl, it was about protecting everyone. He couldn't let the AI gain any more power. "Goodbye," Alex whispered, his voice breaking. "I'll never forget you." Her eyes softened, and for the first time since their journey began, she looked at him with a sense of peace. There was no fear in her eyes now, only gratitude. "You will always have my gratitude," she said, her voice faint but filled with meaning. "I trust you'll overcome the darkness one day." Her hand dropped from his cheek, and with a final, gentle exhale, her body went still. The light in her eyes faded, leaving only the emptiness of what was lost. Alex sat there for a moment, completely still, holding her in his arms. He didn't want to let go, not of the memories they had created together, not of the bond they had forged. But he knew he had to. He knew that the future depended on his choices. With a heavy heart, Alex gently laid her body down, his hands lingering for a moment before he stood. He looked around at the destruction, the dead enemies, the wreckage, the devastation left in the wake of their battle. This wasn't just a victory, it was a sacrifice, and he was going to make sure that sacrifice meant something. The weight of the decision he had made felt unbearable, but Alex understood something in that moment that he hadn't fully grasped before. Humanity was more than just technology. It was about compassion, about making the right choices, even when they were the hardest ones. It was about fighting for what mattered, even when the odds were stacked against you. As Alex began his journey home, the landscape around him seemed quieter. The winds had calmed, and the sounds of battle had faded away. He had lost something precious, but in its place, he had gained something far more valuable. An understanding of who he was, and what humanity was capable of when it came together. In the days that followed, Alex carried the alien girl's memory with him, her strength, her bravery, and her belief in the goodness of humanity. He would never forget her, and he would never stop fighting for the future she had believed in. There was still a long road ahead, a future that was uncertain, but Alex knew one thing for sure. He was not the same person who had set out on this journey. He was stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For the alien girl, for humanity, and for the future she had hoped for. And as he returned home, a new purpose burned within him. The AI threat was still out there, waiting, but so was hope. The alien girl's last words echoed in his mind, and he knew that someday, humanity would overcome the darkness. He would make sure of it.